This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, with part two on a discussion of what happened at a federal prison here in New York this week. Protesters rallied throughout the weekend at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where more than 1,600 prisoners were forced to endure freezing temperatures during last week's polar vortex with no heat, no light, no hot water. On Sunday afternoon, some of the protesters, including family members of those incarcerated, were pepper sprayed by guards. Democracy Now! Was there and spoke to family members of those inside and outside and activists who were there, including Women's March co-chair Linda Sarsour.
The warden has been not responsive. Yesterday, the mayor's office delivered trucks of blankets for everyone, generators, and lawyers from federal defenders went inside to see their clients and asked them, did you get blankets? No blankets. None of these people have gotten blankets. Yesterday, they told us at 6 o'clock is when they got their first meal of the day. They're not getting hot meals. They don't have hot water. I mean, this is inhumane. It's cruel.
So after 6:30 p.m. on Sunday, let's be very clear. After days of protest, officials said electricity was restored, but many cells still lack heat. For more, we continue our conversation with New York City Council member Brad Lander, who toured the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, was standing outside during the protests with the protesters. Thank you for doing part two of this conversation, City Councilman Lander. So do you believe the protests are what got the electricity turned on?
There's no doubt at all. I mean, you know, the electricity went out a week last Sunday, a week ago Sunday, and until Friday when protesters started showing up.
I mean, this is the week of the polar vortex.
The coldest days of the year, freezing in there. And, you know, when the power went out, that meant people could not contact their families by phone or by email. Much of the week, they then put the prisoners on lockdown, which they didn't have to, but they chose to do that. So prisoners I talked to had not showered in more than 2 days, weren't able to get clean laundry and just were wearing the same shirt. You're in your cell, which has your toilet in it, and you can't go out and get any air. And when dinner's delivered, if you've got no power, it's late at night, your cell is dark, you can't even see what you're eating. People were really anxious and stressed out. I talked to one guy who needs a CPAP machine to sleep. He's got sleep apnea, but without power, you can't use your CPAP machine, so he hadn't slept well in the week. Dangerous, anxious. And all of that from Sunday to Thursday with no one doing anything about it because the protests starting Friday and then really ramping up over the weekend with Justice League and Linda and others showing up for a vigil and saying, we're not leaving until the power gets back on. We had been told by the warden on Saturday the contractor had gone home and would come back on Monday. And then Sunday we were told, oh, the part that we need will be here on Monday morning. But they did not want another night of protests. That protest really raised the tension in the building.
And let's talk.
And that got the lights back on.
The protests actually started not with the people outside, but the prisoners themselves clanging on the windows.
Yes. I mean, it is the most chilling to go there. When I went there kind of before the protest started, I went out with Congresswoman Velasquez on Friday afternoon. And yeah, to have the prisoners just like banging away at their windows, hear us, see us. We're human beings. We're locked in these cells. We don't have power. We don't have heat. One thing, I put up a video I took on Twitter late Saturday night, this sort of chilling and still beautiful call and response between the protesters and the folks on the inside. The protesters banging or drumming, and then the prisoners responding from their cells. Awful, but also the kind of solidarity that makes change.
So, again, following up from part one of our conversation, Mayor de Blasio has hundreds of blankets sent in, but they are not distributed to the prisoners?
I mean, there just was not compassion shown, recognizing the humanity of the folks inside these cells. There were so many things that could have been done to make it better, right? Sometimes the power goes out. Now, obviously, the most important thing to do is get a contractor to fix it, because if they had shown urgency that goes with an emergency situation, I think they could have had the power back on by Tuesday. But even in the absence of power, you could tell people what was going on. You could arrange for visitation with temporary lighting because with the family members who were outside. You could let people see their lawyers. You could distribute blankets and hand warmers. You could easily treat people like human beings. a choice was made not to treat people like human
So
beings.
you, because you're an elected official, got to go inside and speak with the head of the prison, Quay, the facilities manager. What did they say?
There was really a range from kind of lackadaisical disinterest, like, oh, yeah, there's a problem, the contractor will be back on Monday, to really outright contempt for the idea that we were there trying to speak up for the prisoners. It was really disturbing.
What about this news that guards maced protesters?
So I was on the inside, actually. I could see that from the other side of security. Congressman Nadler and Controller Stringer and I happened to be in for a follow-up for a visit. And a group of family members led by a mother of a prisoner who was in the building, some other elected officials and protesters came into the lobby of the building. At that time, the door to reception was just open. I mean, they opened the door, they walked in. This mother said, "I need to see my son." She felt very urgent about it. There were a lot of people, but rather than, try to say, you can't do that right now, the guards swarmed down, started pushing the protesters back out, trying to push them out the door. One of the guards sprayed pepper spray. Actually, I then saw they rushed a guard back to where we were who was having like a panic attack induced. We could all feel the pepper spray. Thankfully, there were not any injuries and there were not any arrests, but it was... again, this was where sometimes protest raises the tension level, the banging of the prisoners, them saying, help us, help us. That's freaking out the guards. The dynamic of tension was necessary here to elevate the urgency of the situation, which should have been done by the Bureau of Prisons starting on Sunday, a week ago. And the fact that it took a week and that level of protest to get them to say, you know what, we should get the power back on.
So even when the power went back on, supposedly Sunday night at 6:30, prisoners were saying they were not feeling heat.
So there's a bigger problem here. I saw the power. The power is back on in the building, and that makes a big difference.
You can see the light outside.
You could see the light, and the joyous cry that went up. That also was a kind of different sort of celebration outside and inside. Outside we're all cheering. Inside they're flickering their lights on and off. That's also quite beautiful. So, and now they can come off lockdown. They can call their family members. They can go out of their cells. So a whole range of things that are possible. But there's a couple of bigger problems here. One is that the heat plant in the building is just inadequate for the coldest days of the year. And so if it's freezing again next week or the week after, there are going to be a lot of cells where it's just too cold for people to sleep. And that's going to be a bigger problem to fix. You can't just fix a big building's heating system overnight. So we need real change there. And then we also want to know, why was there not an emergency plan in place? And what are the protocols when something like this happens? And how do we make sure it doesn't happen again?
Mm-hmm. So a number of people are calling for Quay's resignation. In the first part of our interview, we heard from Elizabeth, who was afraid to give her name. She has a relative inside the prison. She said that Quay has repeatedly lied about the conditions inside the prison, said the heat also went off last year for 3 or 4 days, which you confirmed, City Councilman. What about the next time this happens, and do you think Quay might resign?
Well, look, we need pretty thoroughgoing reform at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. This is a peek into what mass incarceration does to us, and it's not a lot better at our city or our state level. The Federal Bureau of Prisons reports to the Justice Department, which reports to the President. So if we want reform of the prison system, I don't know that we're going to get it from the warden at this facility. We're going to need change a lot higher up the ladder than that.
So this is very significant. I'm speaking to you. You're a city council member. You're not in charge of MDC. That's a major prison, jail in Brooklyn of 1,600 people. Talk about why they're in jail.
Yeah. So there's a mix of people in there, a lot there in pretrial detention. So many there who have not been found guilty of anything.
Meaning they can't afford bail.
They can't afford bail, just like at Rikers. And, I don't know the numbers at MDC, how many are there because they can't afford bail. There are some people there serving their sentences, a mix of sort of drug offenses, some white-collar offenses. It used to be a place where there was a lot of immigration detention. We did protest after protest after protest, and there's not as much immigrant detention. Overwhelmingly men, although there's a different building that did not have the loss of heat and power where there are some women. And yes, this is like what we do while people are awaiting their trial, which they have a right to. We detain them in conditions which are inhumane even when the heat and the power is on. It's like living in your bathroom, right? Your toilet is right there. You can barely go out. You haven't been found guilty of anything. Yes, and that part of it we do at the city level on Rikers. We do at the state level in
so
our
I'm going to ask you about Rikers, and that you're a city councilman, so you're not in charge of this federal prison, this federal jail run by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Jerry Nadler was out there Saturday and Sunday. He's a Congress member, a federal position, and he's now become head of the House Judiciary Committee because the Democrats took control of the House. The significance of this for MDC?
Well, first I want to give some props also to Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez because she and Jerry were out there together, and it's her district, and she's a great champion. But now, thanks to the fact that Democrats have taken control of the House, Congressman Nadler chairs the House Judiciary Committee. Bureau of Prisons is part of the Justice Department. The House Judiciary Committee has oversight of the Justice Department and the Bureau of Prisons. So now, what could not have happened, just a short few weeks ago, is that they can do real oversight of what's going on here, can subpoena records, can look at what the heat has been on different days of the year, can understand why there wasn't an emergency plan in place, can ask questions about the warden and what accountability he should face.
They can't fire him. Prison guards took temperature and said it was freezing.
And the union here, the AFGE union, was very important to getting this.
Federation of Government Employees.
Thank you. Was really important in calling these conditions to our attention. Also, the federal defenders of New York were really critical to calling this to our attention. So let's be grateful for the work of those public defenders and those union workers, without which we would not have known what was going on. But now, Congressman Nadler has committed. He was out there Sunday, and he said, we're going to get some problems fixed when the lights go back on, but there's bigger problems here, and we're going to have real accountability. And thanks to Democratic control of the House and his commitment, I think we'll get it.
So right now, this is the Justice Department, whose leader is the non-Senate approved Matthew Whitaker. So he's in charge of Judiciary, which is in charge of the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
And he appeared before Congressman Nadler's committee, a week or two ago. So yes, that's.
But you are in charge of Rikers.
That's right.
And explain what's going on now at Rikers. Is it suffering any of these kind of problems? Well, this is a vast.
Absolutely.
City jail.
Part of the reason why we need to close Rikers, part of the goal there is to really reduce the number of people that are in jail awaiting trial and are just there because they're too poor to afford bail. But part of the reason why we have to close Rikers is because it is inadequate facility to have human beings in. It really is. The buildings are old. They were built badly, just like this building was built badly. We don't have eyes on them. We're not able to make them decent places. So while we want to reduce the number of people who are in jail awaiting trial and don't have anybody in there just because they're too poor to make bail, we do need facilities for those people who are in jail or prison that are humane, and we don't have that on Rikers, and this is an object lesson. Keith Powers, who chairs the Council's Corrections Committee, which oversees Rikers, was out as well on Saturday. He's a new council member. He's just been about a year, but he's toured Rikers a number of times. This was his first time inside the federal facility, and he was saying, we need to use this to keep pushing us forward as well.
So Mayor de Blasio, who has talked about and endorses the closing of Rikers, has a plan to build new jails in New York City to replace Rikers. Your thoughts on this massive jail expansion, and also to community groups like No New Jails that are fighting against these proposed jails?
Yeah, I think two things are true. We want to do broader work at the city, state, and federal level to reduce our reliance on incarceration, not to have people there, to have bail reform, so nobody's just in jail because they're too poor to make bail, to enable people to be released while they're awaiting trial. In New York City, I do think closing Rikers down is critical, and we've reduced the number of people in jail on any night from 20,000 now down to about 8,000. Our goal is to get it down to 5,000. I'd love to see it go below that, but I think we probably, for now, do need to build 5,000 much better beds in better facilities that are humane, that are closer to courts, where people can see their families. So I do think the right plan is what the Lippman Commission proposed, which is close down Rikers, build borough facilities. There should be 5. I don't know why Staten Island gets to not have its facility, but there's only 4 in the plan. But yes, I think these borough-based jails, even though the idea of building new jails is distasteful, I don't like it, I think we have to do it so that we can get that lower cap. It can't be an expansion. We got to build 5,000 beds instead of 20,000.
But no new jails is saying we shouldn't do that. We have to overhaul the criminal justice system.
Of course, we have to overhaul the criminal justice system. And I'm really sympathetic with no new jails. But I fear that if we don't build the new ones, we're just going to leave Rikers open, because we do have people that are in jail. And if we leave Rikers open first, there's still 20,000 beds there. So the numbers could go back up, and the conditions are inhumane. So I would prefer to see us close down Rikers, build those new, smaller facilities. They're going to look big. I mean, they look big from the point of view of the neighborhoods where they are. Maybe we should spread them out a little more, but we need to build those new facilities so we can close Rikers down.
So I want to thank you so much for being with us, New York City Councilmember Brad Lander, who toured the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn this weekend, was out there in the protest, standing right next to Jumaane Williams, who is the New York City councilman who addressed the crowd. And you can go to the part 1 of our discussion about the freezing prison in Brooklyn, MDC, that holds over 1,600 men. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.